So the first is Dr. Regan Gurung, and he is Associate Vice Provost, Executive Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning, the Director of the General Psych Program in the School of Psychological Science, and a Professor of Psychology at Oregon State University. Regan is the recipient of the American Psychological Foundation Charles L. Brewer Distinguished Teacher of Psychology Award, and he's past president of both Division II of APA, which is the Society for the Teaching of Psychology, and Psych, the International Honor Society in Psychology. After Regan speaks, we'll hear from Garth Neufeld, and Garth is a professor of psychology at Cascadia College, the founder of Teaching Intro Psych Northwest, Intro Psych Coast to Coast, and the Teaching of Psychology Incubator Workshop. And he's also the co-founder of the Psych Sessions podcast. He served the national teaching of psychology community through various leadership roles, including the Society for Teaching of Psychology, the AP Psych Reading, and APA's Education Directorate. In 2018, Garth was awarded a Citizen Psychologist Presidential Citation from APA for co-founding Shared Space for All. And he's also the recipient of the 2019 Society for Teaching of Psychology Wayne Whiten Teaching Excellence Award. So please join me in welcoming both Regan and Garth.
Good morning, everybody, and greetings from the Pacific Northwest. It so happens that both Garth and I are in this the West time zone, so it is a little early in the morning, but not too early in the morning. It's just absolutely wonderful to be here with you all. Sue, thank you for that great introduction, and also for really laying the groundwork for what I'd like to talk about in a little bit. The intro psych is personal to me. I've been teaching intro psych for close to 24 years now. It was the very first course that I taught, and I remember when I got my first teaching job, the very first thing that I was asked to do was intro psych. And as somebody who had only taught one class before, being told I was going to teach 120 and then a 250 person class was quite intimidating. So I've worked through it. I've had 24 years to do it. I've been thinking a lot about it. I started doing research on it, and it's just been an absolutely wonderful trip. What I want to do today, though, is really talk about something I've dived into over the last 4 years with Garth. Garth and I had the pleasure and the honor and the privilege of being APA's Introductory Psychology Initiative co-chairs. And what I want to do in the next 15 or so minutes or less is really give you a big picture of what we did. A lot has happened about introductory psychology. You're here because you care about it. And what this little bit is going to do is sort of contextualize all the work that's been done about it. Because if you're like me, you are probably thinking, if this is such a big course, and Sue mentioned the numbers, 1.2 to 1.6 million students take psychology every year, and you can quote me on that. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people, right? So a lot of people, you would hope that we're paying a lot of attention to it. And indeed, the APA Introductory Psychology Initiative set out to do just that, give the intro course the attention that it deserves. Now, the main goal of the APA IPI, and I'm going to call it the IPI, we all call it the IPI. So if you see APA IPI, that's what we mean, the American Psych Association Introductory Psych Initiative. And our goal for the APA IPI was to make evidence-informed recommendations for intro psych. If you've been around teaching for some time, you know how easy it is to get advice from people. I do this worked for me. But if you've also dabbled or dived wholeheartedly into the scholarship of teaching and learning, you also know that while experience and the wisdom of experience is good, evidence-based practices and evidence-informed practices are even better. And there's a lot of work done on introductory psychology. One of the first areas of scholarship of teaching and learning that I dived into was looking at what goes on in the introductory psychology class. And our big goal in the IPI was to make sure that these recommendations were coming from the evidence as much as we have it. And if we didn't have it, we decided to go and get it. So here's a real quick history of what we did. Hopefully you'll get a good feel for what we've done. Sue has already shared the website for the IPI. Lots of great information in there. We've already published an article on some data from the IPI, and of course, the wonderful work of the team is in the Transforming Introductory Psychology book, which really puts together years and years of work, not just our 4 years, but probably the last 20 or 25 years of the work on introductory psychology. So good news, I'm going to give you a lot of that in just the next little bit. There's a lot of explicit introductory psychology work that went on, but I do need to tip my hat to probably where the thought for work in introductory psychology first started. And that was, interestingly enough, another Pacific Northwest engagement. At Puget Sound, the APA held the blueprint for the undergraduate major conference. It was run by Dan Halpern and APA, a week long in the Tacoma region at the University of Puget Sound, where a large number of psychologists got together for a whole week and talked about the psychology major. There was some talk about introductory psychology in there, and there was the clear acknowledgement that more guidance for intro psych was needed. But even in that big 2008, and the book came out in 2009, there was we should do more on intro psych, but nothing very specific. The first real directed effort on introductory psychology was when the APA, the Board of Educational Affairs, and CABE, the Committee on Associate and Baccalaureate Education, put together a strengthening intro psych group. And there are a few artifacts for your later viewing. That strengthening intro psychology group published a report that was endorsed by the APA in 2014 that really laid the groundwork for what is needed in introductory psychology. That document, Strengthening the Common Core of the Intro Psych course, is available as a PDF. If you want a really quick history of the story so far, it's in there. 5 major recommendations, and you can see them on the screen there. There was a push for consistency in intro psych. There was a note for similar content, a lot of attention paid to incorporating research experiences, a focus on training, and a request for national assessment. These were all the key items that this strengthening intro psych group said is really needed for the intro course. A lot of students take it. It's an extremely important course. Here's what's needed. Well, great start, have a charge. More work was done on this. As I said, this document came out in 2014, and the committee built on it. And in what I think is an outstanding milestone for introductory psychology, an updated report from the group was published in a special edition of the American Psychologist. Members of the working group, and I want to acknowledge all that strengthening intro psych committee are on your screen right now. And what we did is, even since 2014, we took feedback from all who had read it, put together some very clear-cut recommendations for what's going on, building on the previous recommendations, laying the groundwork. That special article came out in 2016. Again, another very easy place for you to get a good sense of what the research is on introductory psychology. But perhaps most important for our purposes, as we look ahead to the summer and anticipate some fun planning activities, is as we look at the course, one of the biggest questions that I know we get so often is, what content should we use? And this is the pillar model that came out of that strengthening introductory psychology task force. And both for me personally and for next to every intro psych teacher that I've spoken to, this has been an extremely useful way to answer that simple question, what should I cover in intro psych? And if you're wondering what the answer is, if you've never seen the pillar model before, the basic idea was, in this strengthening intro psych recommendation, was there are 5 major pillars of psychology, as you see in front of you. If you wonder where that came from, this was built on the national standards for high school psychology. This was built on parsed work done on the core of psychology. And the simple recommendation was, and is, if you're teaching the intro psych course, pick at least 2 topics from each of these 5 pillars. So right there, beginning of the workshop, that's something for you to think about as you think about your intro psych course. If you're wondering what kind of content or how much content, there's a simple guideline. Don't push yourself to cover 16 chapters or 15 chapters in a semester, let alone a term, but at least make sure you have 2 topics from each of these pillars. So that was probably one of the most pragmatic recommendations coming out of the Strengthening Intro Psych Task Force. And you hear a little bit more about that as we think, and as you will hear Jane talk about learning outcomes, because this, again, this is all content, but it doesn't say anything about learning outcomes. And that's when I will definitely hand the baton over to Queen Jane Hallinan, who will really give you a good way of how to tackle that. So story so far, if you are wondering what content to cover, at least 2 topics from each of those pillars, and bam, you're on track, you're in alignment, you are in good company. Now, one of those other recommendations was assessment. And that's, again, the big focus of today. After Strengthening Intro Task Force, APA pulled together an assessment working group for introductory psychology. The report of that group is also available. That was endorsed by the BEA in 2017, so a little bit later. In case you're wondering, there is no national assessment in there. Physics has its 4 concepts. This document does not say, here's one way to assess introductory psychology. Instead, it points up some very, very good directions, and more on that in the course of this institute. What it did lead to, though, was the absolutely wonderful APA's project assessment. And Garth, I used your screen here. There's Garth Neufeld's project assessment page. What's wonderful about project assessment is if you are looking for assessments for introductory psychology, actually for any psychology, but you can go to apa.pos.org, and all it needs is your email, and you can get assessments vetted, sifted, and winnowed through by experts. And these assessments come with exactly what you can give to the student, a rubric to evaluate it, and some details on how to use it really well. So again, another really fun thing, again, in the early opening parts of this workshop, make sure you get to project assessment for some absolutely wonderful examples of assessment for psychology in general, but particularly for intro psych. Still more activity. A lot of that assessment work and the thinking about intro psych nicely dovetailed with APA Summit on high school psychology. I mentioned this, and this is particularly important because right now we are poised on, I believe, the release, or maybe it's already been released, of the newest high school standards for high school psychology. And what's exciting and why it's even taking time here is there is synchrony where the new national standards have a very close version of the pillar model for intro psychology. They have a very similar idea about the themes of how to assessment, sneak preview and SLOs. But there's that nice parallelness. So right now, especially for those of you on here teaching high school psychology, and I should say special shout out to all those of you who will listen to this later who are AP Psych reading right now. Thank you for doing all that work that you're doing. But great alignment so that our psychology in the high school and psychology at intro psych can be well aligned, and that's happening very, very well. That brings us to this big focus on the IPI. The story real quick here, more fun details. Looking at all this intro psych activity, APA decided, right, it's time for a focus on intro psych. It formed the IPI in 2017. It was a steering committee, the small steering committee of 8, actually 10, with Garth and me as co-chairs, then added what we like to call a dream team, a wonderful group of experts and enthusiasts and passionate teachers for psychology. The 20 plus of us got together, and we spent the last 4 years working on recommendations for introductory psychology. We charged ourselves with 2 big questions. What works the best, and how do we know? right? Wonderful questions, I think, for all of us to keep in mind as we think about our class. What works best? How do we know it's working best? That was what pushed us. And we want to make sure we had that fine balance. We wanted to provide helpful recommendations, but it wasn't going to be a fiat. It wasn't going to be a, you must do this. And you see that even with the pillar model for content, right? And this is, we actually downplay content because what's more important here is the themes. But even if you care, even if you get pressure on content, even there's a prescription, 2 topics, each of the 5 pillars. But that's the balance we really try to walk to give you the flexibility, to give all of us who teach the flexibility. Those years, what did we do? Well, a lot. The idea was review what's out there, curate what's out there. And if there's something missing, go ahead and measure it. Aaron Richmond is lead author on the first publication coming out of the IPI, an intro psych census, a wonderful empirical study from close to 900 intro psych instructors from around the nation. If you are curious, if you need data on getting more resources or how intro psych is done, look at the Richmond et al. Article in the journal Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Psychology. Wonderful data on the intro psych initiative and what's going on in intro psych. Finally, we wanted recommendations. And now, about almost coming up on a year since all our work got published in the Transforming Introductory Psychology book, you will see that we've aligned it around 4 main themes. SLOs, student learning outcomes and assessment, basically answering the question, what should students learn? How do we assess it? Really important. And that's why I'm excited to kick off today, because my summer really starts today because graduation was just on Saturday. And what better way to start than listening to Jane guide me on my own thinking for intro psych. So Jane, so super excited about this. But that's why SLOs and assessment was first. Right? How do you design it? What are the course models in design? What are the guidelines for teaching introductory psychology? A second major task force worked on course models in design. A third subgroup of the IPI worked on teacher training and development. How do we train teachers to teach intro psych? And part of the answer is this workshop right here. How nice to see a recommendation coming through. And I know Garth and I in particular are absolutely thrilled that today is happening, because we need so many more of these times for us, people who care and teach intro psych, to get together and talk about it. And of course, students. That's why we do it, right? The 4th main subgroup of the 4 IPI subgroups was the student success and transformation subgroup. How, and answering the big questions: how should they study? How do we make a case for it? The good news, you saw all those questions. The good news is we've got some answers. Notice not the answers, but we've got some answers. And you can find a lot of them right there at the APA IPI website. I hope that you get yourself or have a copy of the Transforming Introductory Psychology group. If you're like me, you try to minimize computer FaceTime during the summer. Take that Transforming Intro Psych book, get yourself a nice cold beverage, sit outside someplace comfy, immerse yourself in intro psych. It's so great to be here. It's so great to have you with us. And with that, I'm going to turn over to my wonderful co-chair, Garth. Garth, all yours.
Garth Neufeld. I am in Seattle right now. I've been up since 4:30 this morning because I am in the middle of the AP psychology reading, which I've been doing for 9 years. And so I'm taking a little break to be here because I just wouldn't miss it. And I'm going to watch the recording of Jane Hallinan after this, because I'm telling you folks, this is the person we want to be speaking to us about how to actually implement all these recommendations that have come down. So I'm really excited about being here. Also, Regan, I guess you got the memo for denim shirts in the Pacific Northwest. So thanks for that. And, you know, we actually are on quarters. And so I just finished teaching this week and then straight into the AP reading. And so I'm looking forward to Friday and actually starting my summer, which will be great. All right. So I have the privilege of talking to you about something that is, I guess, not quite on the nose of course design. This is going to be more about you and me than it is about specific resources or backward design or some of the great things that you're going to get out of this, even the history of work in intro psych. So I am going to blast through the first 2 sections of my little talk here. Let me start my stopwatch too. All right. So here's where we're going. Teaching intro psych is challenging. I think we all feel that. And so I'm going to just acknowledge that. And then I'm going to talk about these resources that Regan's already talked about a little bit, and that you're going to hear more about, and that we're going to send out to you so that you can have all these resources. And then finally, I'm going to make this case that at some point you have to believe that you are your best resource, and you need to double down on yourself, because there is, as Regan said, no right way to teach this course. We're offering recommendations, and these recommendations can really be suited to who you are and how you teach. Okay, so I have no business being here. I just want to tell you how intro psych started for me. This is an airport hangar in Fresno, California. This is where airport mechanics go to train as a part of San Joaquin Valley College's aviation mechanics program. And when my background's counseling psych, and so when I was at a clinic in the neighborhood doing internship and collecting hours, a colleague of mine said, "Hey, I've been teaching intro psych just down the street. How would you like to kind of take over the class for me, because I'm moving?" And I said, "Okay, great." So I went here, and this is where I taught intro psych for a couple of years in this hangar with these students who needed social science credit. And they just gave me a textbook, and they said the class is on Friday mornings at 7 a.m. to noon, and it meets 1 time a week. And you don't know anything about teaching, but we're confident that our students can learn something from you. I don't think they said that, but also they had me teach intro to sociology. So just talk about not being prepared. So that was the first shot at intro for me. And I feel so bad for those students in my early years. Maybe you feel like me. But now I'm at Cascadia College up here in Bothell, Washington, just north of Seattle. And it's 20 years later, and I've got to say, I'm still challenged. I started at Cascadia College 7 years ago, and in my introductory psychology course, I looked at their course outcomes, and I saw about 12 or 13 course outcomes, but then they wanted me to layer social sciences outcomes and college-wide outcomes on top of that. And now they've asked me to deal with something like 20 outcomes for the introductory psychology course. And I needed to find a way through that to make it meaningful for my students, and to make it a course that I could teach. And so the course never really stops, and you have your own situations, your own unique experiences at your institutions, requirements that are for you. I'm going too slow. I'm going to pick it up here. The article that Regan referred to, Richmond et al., in that article of surveying over 900 instructors, here's what they found. This won't be surprising, that the major challenges were finding the time to give thoughtful feedback, because we teach large sections, some of us, right? Getting students to read the book, or to read it all. Getting students to think critically was another one that came through. And then managing the range of students' knowledge, skills, and abilities. At a community college, I really feel this one, especially these days. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you're at in intro psych. We know that some of you, we saw the data that you gave us. We know that some of you are brand new to teaching intro psych, and some of you have been doing it for a long time, and everything in between. And I will promise you one thing about intro psych, that when you finish one level and level up, there is always a dragon at the end of the next level that you need to defeat. So this is, I'm gonna pull kind of images and feature things from my life. So this is a Bowser 1985 Super Mario Brothers, the original, and he's always there. He's always there in intro psych. All right, there are resources that can help. It's easy, right? You just Google resources. 29 million resources in 0.45 seconds. That's a lot, but good for APA. They came up on that list, and so did teachpsych.org, which you should become a member of if you're not. It's wonderful. It's $25 a year. You get so much. I could go on and on. I could do 20 minutes on that, but And then Regan, look at that. The hub for introductory psychology is right there as well. So yeah, but there's a lot of resources out there, but there's good news. As Regan talked about, we've been curating those. There have been recommendations that have come out over the last 10 years. Probably the more work has been done in the last decade regarding intro psych than the previous decades combined, right? So I'm going to talk about just a few resources. If you want me to send you resources that I have found particularly helpful, we'll send you a bunch from this work. But if you want to do that, I'll just leave that up for a moment. You can give me your email address and I will make sure that I send out some of these things that I'm about to blast through. So there we go. Okay. So as Regan told you, project assessment is a wonderful resource that is peer reviewed, it's vetted, and intro psych specific. And so you can start there for great assessments. There are good local conferences, regional conferences, national conferences that have to do with introductory psychology. I founded TIP Northwest 8 years ago or something like that. And we just met in April and it was wonderful. Last year during the pandemic, we decided to go online for that April conference. I guess this was, 2021. And we had people come together and create assessments around those pillars. And so at tipnorthwest.org, you can find all of these assessments that we worked on together, and they should align nicely with some of the things that you're going to hear about today. Okay. The Society for the Teaching of Psychology's APA Division 2, again, $25. You should become a member because they give away lots of money and you can apply for grants and those kinds of things. Plus, it's just a great resource. But I chaired a task force on statistical literacy outcomes for introductory psychology last year. And one of the things that we did is we came up with assessments. We didn't want to burden instructors, so we came up with assessments, basically one per typical introductory psychology chapter or topic. And these assessments were aligned with the pillars, but they were statistical, but they would teach students statistical literacy. So while we would be talking about therapy here, and you could use this in the therapy section of your course, it's really getting at the underlying statistical literacy part of the topic of therapy. And so here's what you could do. You give these quick assignments to students throughout the course, and then you're feeling pretty good that your students have developed this skill of statistical literacy by the end. So that's out there at teachpsych.org, APA Division 2. So why do we put so much time into this course? Why so much effort? Why did you show up today? I think it's the answer is kind of multifaceted. One, I think it's a bit of an overwhelming course to teach. I think it is the most challenging course I teach, and I teach a lot of different courses at the community college. It just is inherently challenging, but there's something else about it. In the special issue last summer of the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning in Psychology, Boyson and Becker-Blees opened with this. I just thought it was so well written, and I want to read just a little bit of it for you today. So John Cassiopa once said that teaching introductory psychology is fundamentally different from teaching other courses. In other courses, teachers shape people's careers. In introductory psychology, teachers change people's lives. And that's a heavy responsibility. And that's why it's one of the reasons why we put this effort into these courses, because we know how much is at stake. Most of your students at the college level will not become psych majors. We are no longer recommending teaching to the major unless there's like a specific instance where that needs to be done with a particular cohort of students. We are recommending that we give psychology away to students, and we think about those students who will be going into nursing or business or education or all the other careers that they tend to go into. They're going to get, our psych majors are going to be fine. They're going to get the upper level psychology courses, but that's not who we're teaching to. How do this course, how does it become transformational? Well, one of the things that the Intro Psych Initiative did is a group of them came up with outcomes for the course, which you'll hear a bunch. But one of the outcomes is key themes. These are themes that they cross-cut the content in the course. You can find these themes in multiple different chapters, multiple different pillars. And so we think that these can be fairly transformational. I know this is kind of small, but here, let me just highlight a couple that I think, D and F, that are really transformational. Psychology values diversity, promotes equity, and fosters inclusion in pursuit of a more just society. And applying psychological principles can change our lives, organizations, and communities in positive ways. Teaching your course according to themes is a really nice way to integrate a bunch of information that from the psychology discipline that makes the point of these themes and that students can understand maybe a little easier. But I'll tell you what, students don't get these themes necessarily on their face. That's what I have found out. And in fact, not all instructors do. One of the things that I was able to do, is this going to go? Okay, is I got to partner with Macmillan Learning Psychology to talk about psychology's integrative themes. So I created a video for each theme, 2-3 minutes long, and just talked about, these are for instructors to use, but they're targeted towards students. And so if you want that, I will send that out as a resource as well. Okay, let's see, how's our time? The assumption about resources in general is that evidence-based tools and resources are better, they produce better outcomes for teaching and learning. I don't think that's wrong, but I do think that there's an overlooked variable, and that is you. That's me. It's like how we're using them. Are they a good fit for our students? There's a lot of these, there are multiple other variables. So it's not just about finding that evidence-based thing. And this is where I want to spend my last 5 minutes with you today. You are your best resource. I have talked to so many people as a part of the Psych Sessions podcast that I'm a part of. We have 10 different hosts, and we've talked to a lot of different folks. The flagship series that we do is a long form interview of psychology instructors. And one of the things that I have found over and over again is that some of the most successful people I know in this business, they kind of feel like this. Like this exists in people, where we have the credentials and we have the experience and we get great feedback from students, but we still might feel like we're really just not cutting it. There's a whole literature on imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome. And here are some of the conditions where this tends to activate for folks when they're trying new things, like we're asking you to do this summer. When you're trying new things, you often feel like I'm faking it. I don't know what I'm doing. Or knowing that there are weaknesses in my course. By the way, I am a co-chair of the Intro Psych initiative, and Regan and I actually joke about this sometimes. Our courses are by no means perfect. We look at 10 things in our course that we could change, or that we maybe even know we should change, but just haven't gotten around to at this point in time. It's incremental. How about knowing our personal weaknesses as instructors? Sometimes I can talk to some of you and you tell me about things you do in your classroom, and I think, well, gosh, man, I can't do that. That's a weakness of mine. And then ultimately fearing that my students are going to find out, fearing that my colleagues will find out that maybe I'm not as good an instructor as I would like to be. But here's where I want to just camp for a moment. And this is when we don't understand our unique strengths and what we bring to teaching introductory psychology. I think that this is this can lead to imposter phenomenon. And conversely, I think when you know your strengths, that you can feel confident about what you're doing in this course, okay? Because there is no right way to do it. This is Stehekin, Washington. This is one of the most beautiful places in Washington. The Pacific Crest Trail is here, so people hike from Mexico up to Canada. And so you see hikers. I don't do that. I take a boat up here and go fly fishing every year. So I usually go with a friend, and this one time my friend was unloading the luggage from the boat, and we knew that there was a blue Suburban and the keys were left in it, and they had left it for us so that we could drive it up to our campsite. And so I walked up the road and I found the blue Suburban, and I got into it, and then I drove it back down to where the bags were coming off. And then my friend looked really confused and a bit horrified. And I thought, what's going on? And he said, Garth, the blue Suburban's right here. And so I had taken somebody else's car, not the car I was supposed to take. I had taken somebody else's car. And I'm just going to say that driving somebody else's car is like teaching somebody else's course. You cannot try to be your colleague or Jane Hallinan or anybody else. Really, you have to find your own vehicle, your own way of doing this work. Like if you could take a road trip anywhere in the United States this summer, where would you go? There are many ways to get to your destination. There is not one way to get there. It depends what you value and prioritize. Maybe you want to see ballparks. Maybe you want to see national parks. Maybe you want to see the ocean the whole way. You have to decide your values, and that's how you can make decisions in a sea of introductory psychology that has so many decisions. So which way is right? Wrong question. I think we need to teach the course that only we can teach. So here are some questions that you may want to reflect on. In introductory psychology, particularly, what is unique about you as an instructor? And what are you particularly good at? Students are going to take intro psych. We know, lots of them. So why should they take your course? What are they going to get from you? We all have a story about a transformational teacher, someone who invested so much either into the content or into us as students that it changed the way maybe that we saw education. And I think that investing in these questions will lead you to be that kind of teacher. So I think we have to be, teach the course that only we can teach, so that we don't fall into the pitfalls of perhaps the first group of folks who were publicly shamed. And if you're around 40 years old, give or take a decade right now, you might know who these folks are. And this is, of course, Milli Vanilli, who were called out for lip syncing their songs. And so just a reminder from Milli Vanilli to be authentic, and teach only the course that you can teach. So as you go through this Course Design Institute this summer, and as you hear all these things today, it's going to be too much. You can't do it all, but find out which things resonate with you particularly. And I would say invest in those things. Trust yourself, because you should teach intro psych with confidence. And I think your students will thank you for it.